Hello.
Creo que la cámara de Jessica se detuvo unos minutitos.
Jessica, I think you froze. They cannot hear you. She's going to continue. So I'm going to continue until Energy Box can continue. So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Energy Box, for your time, for the audience, for your participation with this event. I want to say that in this panel will be with key players in their companies with the idea of addressing a number of questions. The first question will be about regulation. And since I have Roberto here, I'm going to introduce you. Roberto, CEO of Green Yellow Brazil, a company that, as Green Flow, was created in 2007 in France, where they have a number of solar plants, also in Morocco, Colombia, and of course in Brazil, where Roberto is operating. That's why we're going to start talking about this market that is active since 2007. What is the legal framework for distributed energy? I suppose it was approved by the Congress and now it's the Senate that needs to approve it. Firstly, I want to ask you questions, and my apologies to the interpreters if I was speaking too fast. What is your opinion about these initial documents, and what do you think are the preliminary considerations to present to the Congress? Thank you to all of you for having me here with this team of experts. There are a lot of people with a lot of knowledge. With regards to the bill 2959, we can say so far, since it hasn't been approved, that it will provide the distributed power market in Brazil more legal stability, more legal certainty. So in terms of investment and energy purchase, it will be very beneficial. So I think there are two aspects that are paramount that we should consider.
Jessica, you're back in? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I disconnect.
No problem. We continue with the event.
Sorry.
El primer punto sería que...
So the first point, as I was saying, is that photovoltaic plants that are currently in operation, or power plants that are already authorized to connect to the grid before the deadline, will still benefit from the old incentives until the year 2045. Ensuring that the portfolio is not affected by the new regulations. The second item to consider is that the legal framework establishes the transition of 12 months of the new transport tariffs will be fully implemented, and that will help the market to adapt more quickly. We could have situations in which the operators that have the connection permit in this opportunity window will be able to benefit from the former incentives. This level of warranty will also be reflected in the capital market, which will be able to present new products for investors and retailers. This is something that we're trying to promoting, launching new products, new infrastructures, etc. However, on the other hand, we will see more entry barriers in the sense that some performance bonuses will be required, and those bonuses will be more demanded so as to ensure the economic feasibility of the project. Because in addition to the increased transportation costs, the capacity of the new project will be limited to 3 megawatts. So that's obviously something to consider, in addition to the idea that CAPEX has deteriorated significantly over the last few months. So there are a lot of challenges that are running in parallel in this new legal framework. In Brazil, there will be a moment, Brazil, which is a very large country, in which we need to have a framework. There's no other option. There's no other solution if we want to provide a solution to the investors. So we see a market in which we think the growth should be sustained in the midterm.
Muchísimas gracias por esa observación preliminar, Roberto.
Thank you very much for the initial consideration. Until we have the rest of the panelists, I invite all the other people to activate their cameras when you guys talk. Now we're going to continue with Enrique Ramon,
con el resto de los panelistas de Brasil,
who can continue talking with the rest of the panelists. Now I'm going to talk to someone in Peru with Henry Guzman, who is CEO of Orange Energy Peru, a company that has more than 10 years of experience in the market, providing engineering, installation, and supply solutions to the marketplace, always relating to renewable energies. They operate in Chile, Ecuador, and Peru, and probably he is going to be sharing very interesting details with us. Henry, in Peru, what are the main challenges that you have in the regulatory framework, especially focusing on distributed energy? And what are the compensation mechanisms that they're considering for consumers? What are the incentives, etc.? Please connect your mic if you want to talk.
Perfecto, está en mute.
Yes. I was trying to.
5 segundos hablando, pero no, mira, antes que nada, agradecer a Energy Box por
I want to thank Energy Box for inviting us to this panel. I am honored to be talking with you guys, with these panelists. I think you guys are also amazing professionals in your area. So the prospect that we have from Orange Energy as an EPC specialist in the renewable energy sector and distributed generation is, a number of challenges related to distributed power generation in Peru. The first thing that we need is to have a political will to support distributed generation as a business, so that distributed generation can have a framework. In Peru, we have a law that was approved many years ago. I think 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, I think you were a pioneer in Latin America, actually. Yeah, but as many other times after the law, you need to have a regulation, a practical regulation, which sets the foundation so that you can implement the law in practice. And that regulation has not been developed for 7 or 8 years. And that's something that we're all waiting to have. We don't only need rules of how the consumer, how the stakeholders can participate in the market. We also need the practical application of that. And that's something that is stopping our growth in this sector. And the second thing that I would like to mention is that authorities don't understand that this is something that is happening worldwide. This is something that is a trend worldwide because we have the technology to properly implement distributed generation without having technical distortions for our network, electrical network. And that's something that can be easily accomplished. And that would certainly benefit the electrical grid. Something else that is required to benefit the power generation sector is to aggregate to distributed generation within policy or framework or a plan for renewable energy. Because what's happening in Peru is that the government, the changing government, we have a new government that comes in and then they change the policy and then they have a different idea of what should be done in terms of renewable energy. And that's not beneficial. That's actually very negative for us. We don't have a state policy that doesn't change regardless of the government that we have, to give some stability to the renewable energy model and distributed power generation model so that we can continue to support this sector in a more sustainable manner. Let me remind the audience that when we talk about politics, right now you guys have a new government, so we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. to see what is their role when it comes to supporting distributed generation in your country. But with regards to that, I will ask you in the next question. But let me, because we don't have much time, and we're going to move on now to another panelist. I will come back to you, Henry. I'm going to go back to Brazil so that I can introduce Ronaldo Martins. Leandro, if you need interpretation, remember you have an interpreter. So that you can adapt.
Yo puedo ir en español también porque están todos.
I can speak Spanish because everybody's speaking Spanish.
Bueno, entonces paso a introducirte en español.
Okay, so you're going to introduce yourselves in Spanish. Leonardo Martins da Silva is the president of Korea Solar, a company that's been in the business for more than 15 years as an important distributor of solar energy. It is a company that has been actively collaborating in the development of new regulations. They've been very active in this debate. And actually also they've been working on power facility safety and security, something that hasn't been really worked on. So I would like you to kind of go deep into this aspect of regulatory affairs relating to distributed generation. So Leandro, what is the situation in terms of regulations in your country right now? What activities are being developed by your company together with other private stakeholders with the idea of ensuring the stability of supply? Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be with all of you. I'm going to try speaking Spanish. I haven't spoken Spanish in a while, but I'm going to try.
Brazil,
Roberto spoke very well about regulation, about the legal framework, which is a bill that's going to be passed, but we're still kind of discussing what the safety of different systems is. We have a number of stakeholders that don't really understand how the market works. They want to understand the market. They are trying to get a reference based on the North American market, follow the North American market, for example, with the NECs. And I think that's something that's going to be happening here, and it will take some time before we're a country that is regulated in the way that things are regulated in other countries. We're still working on this area to see how to best work on this. We work with them. And, sometimes we collaborate in different states with the idea of trying to find common solutions to see what can be done with the idea of ensuring that systems can be safe. Because at the end of the day, we have a problem here in Brazil. We have about 20,000 companies that install solar panels on roofs, on businesses, on houses, and many of them are young companies. Companies that don't really know what the rules and regulations are, companies that don't know how to do things well. So in Ecuador, to sell a product for the sake of selling a product is very easy. You buy something that costs you 10 and then you sell for 12 and you have a profit. But the pre-sale and the post-sale, pre-sale and post-sale, that's very important. Do you think the considerations in terms of safety can be aggregated to the 2959, the CFR 2959 that he mentioned? No, I don't think so. That needs to come from firemen or for the IPA tax. Right now with the iMetro, they're discussing the new rules to know whether it's going to be related by IFCA or not. I mean, these things are new every time and cannot be foreseen that fast. I think it's important to collaborate with the different stakeholders to make sure that, we work with the people that maybe they wanted to buy, but then they got scared of the market and decided not to invest. It's important to address this type of issues because we have an increasing number of regulators who justify the smaller penetration of renewable sources with the idea of protecting the power grid. To learn more about this, let's pass the word on now to Abel Cunha Jr.,
mal el apellido,
My apologies if I didn't pronounce your last name
de
properly.
Planet, y hace
Who
minutos
works for
pudieron
Cell Planet.
todo el detalle de su empresa, por eso en honor al
Earlier he
tiempo pasó a
presented
preguntar
his
directamente
company. So now I'm going to ask him a question about his analysis of the market
las pequeñas instalaciones
and how the little installations can have more reliable energy in Brazil and in other country, protecting these aspects, such as the aspects that Leonardo was discussing.
Oi, Nanda. Como os colegas falaram,
As our colleagues, let me connect this.
estamos agora com o novo
We are now with a new legal framework of solar energy. And from the beginning of the process, I'm going to talk more about the commercial part in Brazil, which comes from 2012. We saw in the last 3 years an exponential growth on facilities, mainly on distributed generation in the commercial and residential areas.
com o desenvolvimento da cadeia
With the development of the,
aqui no Brasil,
we
mesmo
managed to get in Brazil, even with
a entrada de muito equipamento
the exchange rate
tá
being
cada
worse, we got a lot of equipment that has been raising quality, and it's reaching with a more affordable price. So we are creating many companies within the facilities, many new companies, as the colleague talked about, but also about solid companies with experience on the market that manage to provide quality service. I believe that through qualification of those small companies,
que com
with
certeza
more
vão
investment that right now are going within the legal framework,
centralizar,
within the centralized generation chain,
tendo assim, digamos, pouco de receio de grandes
we
investimentos.
were a bit of afraid
Mas que
of
agora
large
vai
investment in that area, but right now is providing return for investors in a more transparent way, let's say like that, and with a legal warranty from
Eu
that
creio que
system.
sim vai
I
passar
believe
por
that
uma
security is going to include everyone involved in that process, mainly installers, and also over time, that is going to expand, I believe, a lot faster because population in general is learning about it, is
como é que eu vou dizer, mais
getting
atraído por ter
more
essa
attracted, so to speak, with that cheaper energy. And of course, that is going to increase
no Brasil.
the commercialization of solar energy in Brazil. I believe that the trend is about expansion and return
O sistema energético como
for the energy system as a whole. I believe is very good. From the technical point of view, Brazil right now already owns part of the matrix being clean from water and wind, but distributed generation will provide security and safety in the whole system, avoiding blackouts and even avoiding large investments on big works. That's why I believe that from economic point of view, both the legal framework and new products, quality products, and the qualification of installers, that's going to raise solar energy, not just in Brazil, but in the whole of Latin America.
Muchísimas gracias por tu comentario, Isabel. Seguramente la audiencia está tomando apuntes acerca de
Probably the audience is taking notes to all the things that you have said. In addition to coming from Brazil, which is a giant,
tras la enorme perspectiva que tuvimos de Brasil, voy a
as a
viajar
result, now we're going to move to Mexico
conversando con Paul Sánchez
so that I can continue talking to Paul Sanchez,
en México,
who is right now in Mexico,
enfrentando
where there's a significant
de los cuales vamos a hablar.
challenges.
En política pública,
Paul
con más de
is a doctor in public sector, and he's a member of Perfecta 21, a significant energy consultancy firm in Mexico. They have very important companies that are very well known in Latin America.
Paul, existen pendientes regulatorios en México.
So there are a number of regulatory frameworks in Mexico to support renewable energies.
por ejemplo, que siguen expectantes de la
Yeah,
publicación
there are a lot of
de regulaciones.
installers that are following distributed
Que
generation.
esta podría
Do you think this
implementarse.
would be something that could be implemented in the short term?
¿Qué otras expectativas y pendientes regulatorios existen?
Do you think this could be applied to other places?
Gracias, Nanda. Un gusto estar con todos ustedes. Un saludo también a
It is my pleasure to be with you and the other panelists.
Es un lugar con mucho potencial.
Mexico is a country
hay retos
with a lot of potential, but we have a number of regulatory challenges that are very interesting. And that's interesting because this is introduces a number of shades of gray, because distributed generation is the only thing that has been developed.
Recientemente acaba de salir el informe del primer semestre.
Recently, the first report for the first quarter was published.
Guadalajara,
Guadalajara,
Pacífico, norte,
which is in the west,
Nuevo León,
León, they have all accelerated the installation of distributed generation facilities.
Una resistencia desde el mismo presidente.
And this is something that has been opposed by the president.
¿No? Y esto
the problem with this is that this is very intermittent.
Problema la red, ya lo decían algunos de los
and that's a problem for the network.
Que generan apagones, que hay problemas.
And that's resulting in blackouts in the grid, you know. The origin of this, the reason for that is that CFE, which is the company that has been a monopoly for many years, all Mexicans have no choice but to buy their energy from CFE, and many of these are trying to find a solution in CFE. Many of us that live in a building and don't have a shared roof, we cannot go for distributed generation. That's a challenge for us. This is something that is a big challenge and that is not being properly managed by the central government. And this is something that was trying to be discussed with Domino's, for example. And this is one of the challenges that things is not allowing distributed generation to develop as much as it should, and that's a bummer. And unfortunately, we are not generating the solar power generation at the level that we would like. Yeah, you just presented a very clear scenario. And it's kind of interesting to see how politics has an impact on this. So this is something that is very interesting. What are the new market prospects so that we can understand what's going on for the audience? Let me go back to Brazil to talk about the market prospects in this large market, which despite the pandemic, when we look what they have been doing in the last 15 years, Brazil, I think, had more than 2 gigawatts or 2.8 gigawatts, nearly 3 gigawatts of distributed solar generation, which as opposed to centralized power generation has grown significantly. And that's why I'm going to ask Roberto, how do you think the changes in the Brazilian legal framework in the neighboring countries? And do you think that could kind of promote the development of new projects? Or do you think there are other aspects that would need to be considered that are somehow hampering this?
De cara, no creemos que el marco
we don't think that
that
the framework is going to affect the market as such. But it could kind of make its growth go slower than it should. Go slower than it is growing now. But we do already have the final version of the document, you know, and that final version would allow us to kind of estimate the different models. The impact is not going to be as negative as we initially thought 2 years ago, more or less, when NL, the regulatory energy of Brazil started to work on this together with the distributors.
Pero cuando se dijo entonces que la GD, la distribuidora.
But later when they realized that the distributed generation could even be put out of the market, which was never the case. However, what we do expect is that the specific types of distributed generation can further be developed, such as, for example, the share distributed model, in which a consortium is created,
B2B or B2C,
in which B2C or B2B could benefit from better access to electricity and energy. There is where we think that for an investor,
puede aplicar
this
quizás descuentos
could
más
be
controlados, ¿no? Y ahí tener el
beneficial to
negocio
obtain more discounts. And that will be very interesting because the business profit is much more significant compared to self-consumption, for example, at a larger scale.
Eso sería la visión de hoy, ¿no?
That would be the perspective of OE.
Un reequilibrio de mercado, como he comentado,
but there's going to be a market restructuring in which I think we would need to analyze in terms of financial engineering what is going to be the risk so that the business can be sustainable.
Hasta ingeniería tributaria.
Even like taxation engineering.
Entonces, de alguna forma, el negocio
in a way,
tendrá que seguirse
the business should develop.
Bueno, ese es un recurso que también podría llegar a aplicarse en otros
That's
mercados.
something that could be implemented in other markets.
Estar anotando para ver si se pueden estudiar esos
To
modelos.
see if we can analyze those models in the different countries. Thank you very much, Roberto. I'm going now to Peru, back to Peru, to talk a little bit more about policies. The first governments of Pedro Castillo, the new president of Peru, spoke about the implementation on a different type of economy. And some foreign investors were wondering whether they could invest in renewable in their countries. Maybe the solution is distributed energy so that they can make this sector more democratic. That's why I want to pass the word on to Henry so he can give us his opinion. So what do you think how do you think that will impact the sector in Peru?
Mira, antes que nada, Nanda, gracias por la pregunta.
Firstly, thank you very much for your question.
Si bien yo creo que ha habido algún concern de los
There's been some concern from the investors because the initial measures taken by the government.
Lo primero que se ha podido ver es que
The first thing that we saw is that there's still some activity on behalf of the investors when it comes to
generación distribuida, porque recordemos
distributed generation power.
Los inversores en generación
Because let me remind you that distributed generation power are investors who all they want is to save. To save on the energy bill.
Se podría decir que puede llegar a ser un negocio contracíclico, ¿no? Por
So
ahí
this can be a countercyclical business in which it's kind of like the situation that Paul described from Mexico, because what you're trying to do is to save in your energy processes. We haven't seen a decrease. We seeing the distributed generation business is continuing to develop.
Es que más bien se está viendo una oportunidad.
And we consider that there's an opportunity.
Una marcada tendencia a lo que es el sector social.
And focusing on the social sector.
Oportunidades fuertes en lo que es el sector de electrificación.
Providing significant opportunities for rural distribution related to renewable energies.
En el sector gobierno, en licitaciones.
And that's why there are a lot of projects that are being launched in that sense.
Proyectos de electrificación rural.
And in that sense, that the market is evolving positively. Here in Peru,
un porcentaje importante de la
red, networks or grids
que está off grid,
that used to be off grid,
con pequeños
and that solved their problem with small homemade programs with diesel generators or other technologies.
Crear un sistema, poner un sistema aislado, ya sea
And in that sense, you know, they've come up with like hybrid systems, etc., so that they can complement the diesel technology and to generate
muchísimo más barata que
additional power sources, because this renewable energy would be cheaper than if you generate it with diesel, and that's what we're seeing right now.
y creo que eso es lo que más se puede resaltar.
That's, I think, what we could do.
Muchísimas gracias por tu comentario,
Thank
Henry.
you very much for your comment. Let's go back with Leandro Martin.
Hemos visto un gran crecimiento de instalaciones
We've seen a significant growth of distributed generation in Brazil,
de los grandes parques
higher
centralizados, como
than in the large centralized parks.
saber un poco a qué
And I would like to know,
este crecimiento
why do you think this growth has been uneven?
en el cual tenemos grandes parques solares siendo viabilizados y no tantas instalaciones de generación distribuida conectándose directamente.
My apologies, the interpretation is ending now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
De microinversores, eso está teniendo mucho éxito.
Sí, nosotros, yo creo que acá en Brasil el precio de la energía sube demasiado, mucho más que la inflación, y esto es año por año, viene pasando eso. Entonces, la inversión en un sistema en tu casa o tu comercio es una inversión que te trae muchos beneficios financieros. Entonces, por supuesto, esa es una de las razones. Y nosotros, como empezamos la compañía con microinversores, o sea, para sistemas de dos paneles hasta cuantos quieran, ¿no? También popularizamos esto de poner una casita, hoy una casa más o menos, o una casa grande, o un comercio pequeño, un comercio medio, comercio grande, y son 600.000 instalaciones en Brasil hasta ahora, desde 2012, y eso es mucha cosa, pero hay mucha cosa que venir todavía. Y después que pase el próximo año, que tiene eso de la nueva ley, vamos a tener otro mercado también, que son las baterías, así como Henry habló, los sistemas híbridos van a tener también mucha búsqueda. Entonces no vamos a parar, porque el precio de energía, el problema de agua que tenemos en Brasil, esto también viene hace años, y esto me parece que va a continuar. Y esto significa que la energía va a continuar subiendo también. Entonces, yo creo que la nueva ley no nos para, así como Roberto también lo dicho, no hay como parar el mercado. Puede ser que hace alguna interrupción en algunos modelos de negocio, pero otros también vienen en la secuencia, ¿no? Por supuesto, los de híbridos son los más obvios que vengan, y vamos a seguir así. Tenemos un eslogan que es al alcance de todos, o sea, estamos reachable for all, para las clases más bajas, las medias, las altas, y eso es muy lindo. Eso es somos muy felices con esto que hicimos en el mercado y seguimos trabajando.
Bueno, haciendo la misma pregunta a Abel, ¿cómo evalúas el proceso de la generación distribuida en Brasil, pero en líneas generales si nos puedes comentar de todas las energías renovables?
Deixa eu desligar aqui. Olá, Nádia. Comercialmente, a geração distribuída tomou de assalto o nosso mercado aqui no Brasil, né? Ela é responsável por cerca de mais de 90% de todas as instalações. Eu creio que com a disseminação agora de novos equipamentos vai melhorar, mas o marco legal aqui para nós também trouxe algumas dificuldades para o pequeno produtor de energia, né, para as microgerações, que vai elevar a taxa, digamos assim, de contrapartida quando você injeta essa energia na rede e depois retorna ela para o seu consumo no período que você não está gerando. Então, de certa forma, a gente tem uma balança aí que eu creio que a nossa política aqui dentro tenta mantê-la estabilizada. Quando as vantagens começam a aumentar, entrou agora o marco legal para dar uma equilibrada nisso. A geração distribuída tinha muita vantagem e a centralizada estava meio, como é que eu vou dizer, prejudicada. Eu acho que após a legalização do marco e a homologação dessa nova lei, a coisa vai equilibrar, vai gerar mais serviços na instalação centralizada e vai também dar uma freada um pouco na geração distribuída. Mas ainda assim, olhando como um todo, é um excelente cenário para o investimento, porque a energia no Brasil está com um valor bem alto. E a tendência é que essa alta do custo energético se mantenha. Então, eu vejo sempre o lado positivo. Eu creio que a energia solar vai disparar tanto na centralizada quanto na distribuída a partir do ano agora de 2022, passando a pandemia e os mercados estando mais abertos. Eu creio que toda a América Latina vai ser beneficiada com produtos de qualidade e com a evolução desse mercado aqui para nós. Nanda, eu tenho um compromisso agora, daqui a uns minutos. Gostaria de agradecer a todos os colegas. Foi um prazer poder repartir esse espaço com colegas tão qualificados aí com vocês. Eu espero que todos tenham um ótimo dia. Agradeço muito os nossos espectadores. Nanda, um abraço. Tudo de bom.
Muchas gracias. Saludamos
Gracias.
a toda la audiencia. Voy a hacer una última preguntita a Paul Sánchez de Perceptia 21 para ya ir dando cierre a este evento, aprovechando que también, según me informan, los intérpretes ya se retiraron, así para que todos estemos alineados. Paso a la última pregunta, nos perdemos de un último bloque de preguntas y respuestas, pero queda la invitación para que toda la audiencia conecte con los distintos referentes que escucharon hoy vía redes sociales, pueden encontrarlos en LinkedIn o a partir de los contactos oficiales de sus empresas, directamente en las páginas oficiales. Paul, te dejo el compromiso de tener el último comentario del evento acerca de qué retos y oportunidades identificas en política energética para continuar impulsando energías renovables. Puntualmente en México, pero si se puede extender al resto de la región, bienvenido sea.
Muchas gracias, Nanda. Creo que yo me decantaría en dos cosas. La primera, en realmente dejar, y lo digo porque en México así pasa, me condiciona mucho mi hábitat, empoderar mucho más al consumidor. En México todavía tenemos la idea de que la energía es algo muy diferente a cualquier otro commodity, muy diferente a cualquier otro servicio y que aunque lo sea y aunque tenga su grado de excepcionalidad, no deja de ser un servicio que pudieras contratar con la empresa que tú quieras, con la tecnología que desees utilizar. Y esto, en la medida que el consumidor empieza a estudiar, así como pasa días viendo los modelos de computadoras o de teléfonos, empieza a generar un conocimiento de qué quiere. Y entonces puede entender qué es lo que está buscando, cuáles son las características que está utilizando y lo más importante, qué condiciones de crédito en muchos casos va a tener, cuáles son las cláusulas de ese contrato, qué tengo que mirar la garantía, la capacitación de la empresa. Y estoy pensando quizá en una escala muy pequeña, porque los compañeros ya hablaron de la gran escala, pero en México somos somos más de 50 millones de usuarios, pero 45 millones de esos usuarios son domésticos. Y son muy poquitos los que tienen paneles solares. Entonces, imagínate el potencial que existe en nuestro país y que sigue detenido. ¿Por qué? Porque faltan definiciones regulatorias. Yo esperaría que en algún momento recapacite este gobierno o en el peor de los casos, que en 2025 tengamos una segunda ola más acelerada.
Muchísimas gracias por tu comentario, Paul. Saludo a toda la audiencia y agradezco este tiempo y reflexiones de mercado que han realizado todos los panelistas el día de hoy. Los invito a todos a seguir a Green Yellow, AES, Ecori, Orange Energy, Sol Planet y Perceptia 21 en las distintas redes sociales, a conectar con estos referentes del mercado. Y ahora sí doy la palabra a Jessica. Jessica, are you there? Or someone from
Linda. Yes, I'm here.
Box?
Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you all. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for